everyone. Hello, folks. All right, I'm just going to give it a minute here to let everyone trickle in. All right, hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here tonight or this afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Rachel with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. For me, just quickly, I'll share, I look forward to these virtual gatherings because they add a lot of hope to my week. And I think these days we could all do with a few more things to feel hopeful about. So I hope for you all that this time that we spent together every week makes you feel a little bit more hopeful about the future. So we're very happy to have Summer Lee running for Congress in Pennsylvania's 18th Congressional District here with us tonight. Please go ahead and turn on your camera so we can see each other and feel like we're together. Hopefully one day we will be together in a room again. When you have a question for Summer, please just send it in the chat. My colleague Nick will send you a direct chat to let you know that we're coming to you, and then we'll just request for you to unmute yourself, and then you can ask some of your question yourself. And you can go ahead and feel free to send your question at any point throughout our conversation. We aim to keep these short and sweet and be mindful of everyone's busy schedules. So bear with me, please, if I can't get to your question, but we will do our very best. The one final programmatic note, while these events are free and we've purposefully designed them to be that way, we do really hope that if you're inspired and excited hearing Summer speak about her campaign and her story, and you find yourself sending in clapping emojis and the heart emojis and cheering to yourself, that you'll chip in to help her campaign. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to our P-TRIP co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor.
Thank you to everyone for joining our call tonight. I am so excited to introduce Summer Lee, who is running for an open seat in Congress to represent Pennsylvania's 18th Congressional District in Pittsburgh, which is where she grew up. And we first met Summer when she ran for state legislator, and we were proud to endorse her then. She won that race with more than 60% of the vote. She defeated a 20-year incumbent and became the first Black woman from southwestern Pennsylvania to hold the office of state representative. And in the state legislature, Summer has really led the charge to transition the state to cleaner energy, to move away from fracking. She talks a lot about how her region suffers from some of the worst air quality in the nation, and that CEOs get rich while the families in her community suffer from asthma and cancer. She has also called for the fully funded replacement of all lead water lines. She says it's unconscionable that anyone in America wouldn't have access to clean water, which is something we certainly agree with. And something else that I think is very important, especially in the Pittsburgh area, but across America, Summer talks about how critical it is to create millions of good-paying union jobs in the process of moving America to 100% clean and renewable energy. And that's transformative and important and brave leadership. And it's also necessary to make sure that workers don't get left behind in Western Pennsylvania. Summer truly shows what it means to have vision as a candidate, an elected official. She's a proud advocate for Medicare for all, for reproductive and LGBTQ rights, for ending student debt, for criminal justice reform, for environmental justice. And I just can't wait for you to hear from her. So now let me warmly welcome Summer Lee and turn things over to her.
Stephanie, thank you so much. And thank you so much to everybody at PCCC for your support, for your ongoing support, for all of the folks who have contributed to this and my past campaigns. When we talk about grassroots power, when we talk about building power in electoral and economic and social power for Black and brown folks, for marginalized folks, for progressives, it truly is not a me thing, right? It can never be a me thing, but we can only accomplish this when we are building these big we-centered campaigns that are not bound by geography or district or even election cycle, but truly building in and out of election cycles, right? And taking these opportunities like this to really throw down for each other, throw down for our movement. And I wanna say that this is a huge opportunity. This is going to be the first time in 26 years that we have an open seat here in this district in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. And like a lot of folks, and when I first started running, even the first time I ran, that was the first time in 20 years that we had a change. So change is slow to come in Western Pennsylvania, it's slow to come in Pittsburgh. And as we've been building power, as we've been trying to get poor folks, working class folks elected to office, it had been really, really slow, because for the longest time in a place like this, right, we were accustomed to being represented by the same old folks who come and they do their politics the same old way. And rarely were we seeing people who look like me, who had navigated society the ways that I had to navigate society. Rarely were we even given the opportunity to get to the starting line. So when I first decided to run in 2018, I was coming up off of a stint of organizing. I had learned what it meant to organize folks. And I had all these theories about what would happen if we just engage communities differently. What would happen if people who had power and a platform and leadership were actually talking about cyclical inequality, right? If we recognize that racism isn't just, people who don't like somebody, or the issues that we're facing in our urban communities and our Black and our brown communities aren't issues that are one-off things. These are all interconnected issues. And we were organizing around that, and we were building that. And the reality is that in my community, people had long since given up on any reason to come out and vote. What we were seeing were, people like us, progressives, young people, working class people, urban center voters, we come out and we turn out. And every time what ends up happening is we see our action never translate into any tangible change. And in a way, we're seeing that right now, right? Here, coming up off of one of our biggest organizing efforts to get rid of Trump. Right? When so many people said that this is the thing that we should be galvanized around, the first things that we see given up are a pathway to citizenship. We're seeing environmental justice and childcare, student loan debt, all of the things that galvanized us and brought us out, always thrown by the wayside. I decided to run, and we organized in 2018 for the first time that I ran against the very things that we're seeing play out at the national level. At one time when I stepped up, we had a school system that was in disarray. Black and brown kids who top 10 in the nation being funneled into the school to plantation pipeline from my school district. We had kids who were in international news for being harmed by the adults who were in that, police officers, principals. We had a student who was killed by a police officer at home. And then at the very same time, we had a fracking proposal, a fracking well that they were proposing to put in our urban Black community in the same place on top of a steel mill that already contributes to us having the worst air quality in the nation. And there were no politicians, Democrat or Republicans, who were talking about those things. There were few leaders who were saying that we will take on the air quality in this nation. But here we are, knowing that if you're Black or you're brown or you're poor, you're more likely to live in a community that, because of redlining, right, you're more likely to live in a school system that is underinvested, under-resourced, dangerous, right, unsafe, not culturally representative. You're more likely to live by an environmental hazard. Right? You're less likely to have food choices, medical centers, jobs in our communities, right? Medical deserts, transportation deserts, food deserts. And we're just literally trapped in these communities. And I looked, and it was my community, right? My community fit the bill perfectly. So we ended up running our campaign in 2018, talking about racial justice, talking about environmental justice and ending fracking in a community where they had told us that you can't talk about fracking, where you can't talk about environmental justice, because if you talk about that, then you don't care about jobs. And we knocked on every door in our community that we could knock on. And we talked to dozens of thousands of voters in the span of our election. And we organized kids in our high school to speak out against racism that they experience, and speak out about police violence. We organized people in Black communities and brown ones, rich and poor ones, middle class ones, because my district is that diverse, right? And we organized them to stop a fracking well that was going to come on and increase our outcomes, our poor outcomes, right? We organized against that. We used a campaign to do that. And since then, since becoming the first Black woman to get elected, we didn't stop at that election, right? Because we recognize that progressive isn't just one person, isn't just one cycle. It isn't just your policies, it's your politics. So since then, we've been building a movement in Western Pennsylvania that has changed the face of electoral politics here. So when I started by saying we have an opportunity like we've never seen here, that's why. Because we spent the last 4 years building something that no one believed we could build here in this area. Where we watched in the last presidential cycle as folks told us that we couldn't talk about fracking because of Pittsburgh, because of Western Pennsylvania. We built up a community of folks all over here who are running for office at the local level, at the state level, and now at the federal level. We've been running candidates, progressives, unapologetically, Black and brown candidates. We got our first Black mayor, a historic slate of judicial reformists, folks who recognize that racism is inherent in our system and that it needs to be addressed, something we had never seen in Allegheny County. And as we've looked up, we came to this race where the incumbent suddenly got out of the race at the very moment where we have the movement, where we have the momentum to truly take our movement to the next level. So I decided to run for office for the same reason that so many of you are here, right? I'm tired of folks who represent us lacking the urgency that we need to get things done. What I realize is that when you are living these things, like when you're living the student debt crisis, when you're like me and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars that you will never be free of that burden just because you needed an education, because you were told that an education was the way to get there, right? That they don't have that urgency, so it's not a priority. Or you don't have to worry about what it's like to live in a community where any day you might have the worst air quality. That's not urgent for them. Or gun violence, police violence. Those aren't urgent matters to Congress people who never live and never traverse communities like ours. They lack the urgency because they're not things that impact them. We need and we absolutely can send people to Congress, send people to all levels of government who now have the lived experience, who have the urgency, that diversity of perspective, because we are not going to win Medicare for all, which I'm for, or a Green New Deal, right? Or student loan relief, free college, free education, abolition from our racist criminal injustice system, right? We're not going to win that one candidate at a time. It's not going to be a magic candidate who's going to help us get there. I'm running because I recognize and I truly believe that the way that we are going to win that is by building movements that expand the electorate, that empower folks who have never seen themselves reflected in these systems, to really talk about the need to dismantle, not just to fit in, right? And the only way that we're able to do that is by bringing more people into the fold, right? By doing our politics different. So I decided to run for Congress because we have built something here, but this is an opportunity to scale up. In my previous elections, we've doubled turnout in one, and another we had 50% turnout in the middle of a pandemic after we changed the election date. And we were able to do that because we talked about the things that everybody cares about in a district that's over 75% white, that is both suburban and city, Black and white, right? We were able to take that same message, racial justice and economic justice, labor unions, right? And workers' protections. We were able to talk about housing and healthcare, Medicare for all. We were able to talk about those in every doors, contrary to the national narrative. We were able to talk about those everywhere we went. And we were able to win on those. And we were able to bring people out and organize them and not just keep them engaged in our cycle, but to get them engaged and excited to move forward, engaged and excited to change the landscape here in this community. That's the power that we have in this moment, right? In this particular election cycle. So that's why I'm so excited to be able to work with you all, to be able to work with folks who are progressive and share that vision and understand what's at stake and the urgency of this moment from all over the country, and recognize how unique an opportunity we have here in Western Pennsylvania, where we are going to set the standard. If we're going to pass a Green New Deal, it's going to have to come through Western Pennsylvania and places like this. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm excited about answering questions, hearing from you all about what matters most to you. And if now is the time, I'm happy to talk about what our pathway to victory is, but I don't want to speak out of turn. So I want to send it back to Stephanie or Rachel, and you tell me if that's where we want to go or if we want to go straight to questions and answers.
Perfect. Yeah, no, Summer, that's perfect. We have a bunch of questions rolling in. We have folks clapping and the heart emojis. So we're going to take our first question from Ira, Mr. Ira Denver. Ira, can you go ahead and unmute yourself, please? We have over 60 people with us today, so folks, bear with me. We're going to try to get to as many of your questions as possible, but Ira, let's go ahead and have you kick it off, please. Ira, what's your question for Summer?
Yes, first, Summer, I gotta tell you how pleased I am to meet you and how excited I am that you're doing this. Your presence, I've never heard of you before. Your presence is awesome, and the way you talk is awesome. I love it. That's okay. So,
Thank
enough
you.
flattering, all true, but still flattering. Okay, here's the question. I'm with you on all of the progressive stuff you're talking about, totally. I want to know, how can we make this happen? How do you show middle-income white folks that progressive policies are their best hope for prosperity for themselves and their kids, just like everybody else?
Yeah. I'm happy you asked that, right? Because that's the work that we've been doing here through my past House races when I ran for the state house, is what we've been doing kind of in our organizing since then, as we've been kind of building out our kind of political, my PAC, running new folks. My district right now, of course, right? A congressional district is much bigger, but my district right now, I would say, is a kind of a microcosm of that, right? And I mentioned that it is a majority white district. We have white folks of all socioeconomic statuses in this district. We have Black folks, of course, those folks track in some of the poorer communities. We have folks who are not in the city proper, but are in the city, right? So we have folks who are in suburbs. We have folks who are in cities. And again, we were able to talk to those folks. And what we know is that no matter where you live, no matter what race or gender or socioeconomic status, people want the same things, right? Everybody believes that irrespective of their zip code, their kids should have a quality education. They believe that irrespective of where they live, right, that they want clean air and clean water, right? They want housing in the neighborhoods that they call home that's affordable. They want to be able to go to a doctor and not be afraid of the copay, not be afraid of the bill that they may get, right? They want some sort of recovery as we're traveling and traversing through COVID-19. The disconnect in that is how we get there, right? There are some people who have been convinced that other people want to take some things from you, right? Or that that's impossible. So what we talk about when we say what we can have, we talk about not that what we can have, that what we should have, how inevitable it is, right? We talk about the fact that, you know, the United States is actually an anomaly when it comes to our healthcare system, that we spend more than any country, that any other country that we consider a Western country, right? But we get less. You know, when we talk about those things, when we talk through those fears that they have, they come over to this side, right? When we talk about our education system, when we talk about our criminal justice system, when we say that when we are spending more money on incarcerating folks, that's money that's not going to educating our kids, right? That's money that's not going to infrastructure, not going to building out houses and small businesses, right? When we talk about it that way, these folks understand that. Part of this is bringing them out to vote, right? So I think it's two problems, right? It is, there are people who believe our message, who understand that. And I'm talking about white, middle income folks, right? Who recognize that a high tide lifts all ships. But we have to have those conversations very frankly. We have to confront racism. We have to do it, right? It's the elephant in the room, but you cannot talk about class without talking about race. And when you do it, and you do it in an upfront way, not that is just the past, but the way forward is to move through it. When we talk about it that way, they understand that, right? The second thing is expanding the electorate, right? A minority of folks have been empowered because those are the folks who have political power. Those are the folks who are able to get candidates across the finish lines. Those type of people overrepresent us in government. They overrepresent us in leadership, whether it's businesses, corporations, even nonprofits, right? But when we're talking about expanding the electorate and empowering people who share these values with us, but had never realized that they have a voice here, that they have the power here to contribute to the system, that's what we've been doing here in Western Pennsylvania. And as we've been doing that, this is a movement that isn't just, Black folks. This is a majority white area. There are liberal and moderate white folks who are contributing to this movement in different ways now because of that, because they're realizing that. So it's scaling that, right? It's having these conversations, it's running campaigns, right? It's really addressing the local inequities that we have. That's how I see that we do it. But what I know is, and I think that what you all know is that people all over believe in these things. It's just a matter of getting that messaging out and doing that organizing work.
Thank you, Ira, for the question. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Summer, for the thoughtful response. All right, we're rolling, so let's keep the questions going. We have next Miss Joanne Vassie. Miss Joanne, please go ahead and unmute yourself. And Joanne, can you tell us where you're joining us from, your city and state, and then your question for Summer, please.
Okay, I'm Joanne Tosti Vasey. Vasey's the last half of my last name.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Summer, I've known about you for several years. I know the Pennsylvania Now PAC endorsed you when you ran for the state legislature several years ago. I am a community organizer and an elected official as well. So I understand where you're coming from. My question is regarding women's rights. The Supreme Court is likely to overturn Roe v. Wade this coming June. And the Pennsylvania legislature, the Republicans are likely to overturn or outlaw abortions here in Pennsylvania. In fact, 2 days ago, the Senate passed out a committee and a constitutional amendment to get around the governor's vetoes of all of the abortion bills they've been trying to pass over the last several years. So if you get in Congress, what are your plans for protecting a woman's ability to control her body and decide whether or not she will terminate an unwanted or dangerous pregnancy? Here in Pennsylvania, with our current makeup, if we don't have something at the federal level, we're going to have women in back alley abortions again.
Yeah, that's certainly true, right? I think there are states that are in, I think that as we see the Supreme Court moving and inching ever closer to overturning Roe v. Wade, right, and denying women and birthing folks their autonomy and their reproductive health rights, the organizer in me recognizes how important state legislatures are. And even in Pennsylvania, as we think about the Republicans and their attempts, which there are many, right? There are many attempts at constitutional amendments. It's been their tactic recently, is that anytime Governor Wolf does something that they don't like, or anytime that we're able to defeat something because they're just unaccustomed to having to negotiate, accustomed to having to compromise, because they have consolidated that much power, right? They try the route of constitutional amendments. They're not easy to pass, of course, and they have to pass 2 consecutive legislatures with the exact same language, which means that, especially in a redistricting year, these are opportunities, right? In Pennsylvania, we have to have a Democratic governor. And I'm not, and it's funny, I'm like the last person to say the vote blue no matter who. This is the one time where I'm like, y'all, we need to come out for the Democratic governor. What is at stake is immense, right? At the federal level, right? Of course, the federal government always has a role to play in this, as the preemptive kind of, governing body here, right? There is a role in passing legislation that protects these rights, getting rid of things like the Hyde Amendment, ensuring that that is not that we're not, putting that in, any of our legislation, right? Where any money that's going into institutions that offer those services, right? That's incredibly important, right? And that's something that we have to keep fighting for. But for me, the organizer in me is like, yes, I'm obviously going to fight for that, and we're going to fight for that. And Democrats, hopefully, I say that with a pause because we still have work to get some Democrats on board with reproductive health, right? Or should absolutely be fighting for that at the federal level. In the meantime, we cannot, and I'm sorry to pivot, we cannot underestimate how important state legislatures are. Oftentimes we put a lot of money and resources into these federal races, and that's important, right? We absolutely, want to have at the highest level, right, progressives, folks who care about Black and brown folks and women and LGBTQ folks. We need that, right? But at the state level, those are our first level of defense. And as we're seeing Texas, as we're seeing Pennsylvania, it should be a stark reminder that we have huge, vast opportunities there at those state levels to stop some of this right in its tracks before it could ever get to the Supreme Court. So I want to just go back to saying that wherever you are, invest in candidates at the state level, right, who are running as pro-choice folks who are going to protect reproductive health, right, who are going to protect clean air and clean water, but reproductive health in the midst of this. And then we can get into expanding the court, in the meantime, right? The things that we should be doing, we should be expanding the Supreme Court. Democrats have got to play the game to win. That's what we see Republicans do. They're playing for power. They're playing for power. And even as we have Democrats, like someone mentioned a Democrat, right, who is in there who does not care about reproductive health, right? We need to play to win. And when we have the power to do that, getting rid of the filibuster comes up often, but expanding the Supreme Court, this is the perfect time right now. I saw a tweet from one of my colleagues that says, I hope that we're willing to replace Breyer with 5 under 55 progressive judges, right? And it sounds funny, but no, that's exactly what we should be doing. And we should be talking about term limits, because 9 folks who serve and usually get their jobs because of the political access they have, the political capital that they have, the types of colleges they went to and law schools they went to. They shouldn't get to control the fate of marginalized people for decades and decades and decades on end, right? So I think that those are things that we should be talking about at the federal level to make sure that every time a Republican governor who by luck, gets to appoint several judges, doesn't get to completely change the course of our rights in this country.
Thank you, Joanne, for the question. Very important question. Summer, thank you. Okay, up next, we have a question from Beth Angel. Miss Beth, can you please go ahead and unmute yourself? And will you please share with us where you're calling in from, city and state, please? And what's your question for Summer?
Sure. Hi, how's everyone doing? I'm from East Hampton, Connecticut, which is basically the center of the state, 15 minutes south of Hartford, Connecticut, which is the hub of the legislature here. The question I'm asking you is because we're trying to run a candidate here for a national election. And my question is, as you said, how do you win your election? What do you have to do? Because that's what we're struggling with here in Connecticut. We're trying to get more progressives into national and state. So how do you win this election, your election? What do you have to do specifically? Thank you. Take care, and I hope you win.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. As we're kind of building out this progressive electoral movement, the first thing that we have to recognize are the very real barriers that progressive folks, and as progressive, we're of course more likely to be, connected to political establishments, right? We're more likely to be Black or brown, or we're more likely to be women. We're more likely, right, to be folks who come from poor backgrounds or working class backgrounds. There are very real systemic barriers that we have to be very intentional about addressing. So when we ran, right, the organizing, the grassroots, and the commitment to it, you can't have, can I cuss? I don't want to. You can't like half-ass your commitment to grassroots, right, to that grassroots power. You have to lean into that 100%. In this race and in the races that we have before it, we leaned into that 100% as we recognize the very things that we're trying to defeat, right? The influence that corporations have, the influence that oil and gas and big pharma, the influence that the establishment politicians who obviously don't have the interests of poor and working folks at heart because they are not from poor and working folks. It's very difficult to counteract that in fundraising because we do have to raise a lot of money. On a campaign like mine, we expect that we're going to need to raise $1.5 million. I am a Black girl from the Mon Valley. I grew up poor, right? I grew up on, my family, we grew up on Section 8. I don't have $1.5 million in a Rolodex. And so many of our candidates are told that if you don't have the money that you need in your Rolodex, then you should not run. So being very vocal on the front end about that, about expanding the realm of what's possible for campaigns, right? We can counteract money with people power. That is very true, though you do still need money. So we were very intentional. We are very intentional now about our organizing, about our efforts to get into every community that we have, to be on the ground with the people, talking to them face to face, knocking on doors, texting them, connecting with them in more innovative ways, right? In the past, the old machine, they rely on really antiquated methods and ways of running campaigns, right? It's a very incestuous kind of consulting culture that they are in. And that's something that we can use to our advantage, right? We know what they're going to put their money into. It's going to be TV ads and mail, but they're not good in the depth yet at putting their money in a digital, right? Where we know that digital follows people. Folks are up on social media, right? And it follows posts. They're not putting their money, into organizers who come from communities who already have those built-in relationships and who's going to pound that pavement. They're not interested in that yet. They haven't turned the corner to do that. So we still have that advantage. In this race, right? We're thinking that we're going to have to ID positively 50,000 people. So we are investing in organizers from this community. We are investing in, digital and email strategies, any type of way that we can engage authentically folks, right? Not just like, hey, we want some money from you, but engaging them, talking to them about the things that they care about, connecting them with other movements and other communities so that they don't feel so isolated. That's one of the things that we did in our campaign, right? My first campaign when we ran, that fracking issue was incredible. It was a huge issue. And so many people believed in their own kind of silo that maybe no one else cared about this as much as they did. And when we were able to connect them to other people, it just grew that power, right? And it grew that excitement to defeat this. It helped them to know that they had more power than they thought they did. That's how we won those campaigns, right? But we have to invest in infrastructure. This is a progressive problem all over. We need campaign managers and field directors. We need organizers, and we need cultures that nurture them, doesn't burn them out and run them off. There are so many talented young folks who were not putting in the pipeline to run campaigns at the highest levels. And that's been killing some of our progressive candidates at the state and the national level. So that's critical if you want to win, right? We cannot underestimate how important it is to have competent staff that shares your values. That's one of our biggest barriers. So that's how we win.
Thank you. So I think we can sneak in one more question. We're live streaming this. So I want to sneak in one more question from folks joining us online. Summer, Wendy wants to know, you're talking to a lot of folks all the time about Medicare for all and the Green New Deal and a slew of issues. When you leave after speaking with someone, what's the one thing that you want them to remember about you and your story?
About me? Oh my goodness, that's not a question that I've ever had. I think though, the one thing that I want folks to remember about me and my story is that it's not about me individually, right? That it was never just about me. People, often talk about the fact that I use we a lot, and I use we so much, it's almost like second nature to me, but it's not out of like, I'm trying to look impressive, or I know that that's what people want to hear. No, it's really how I feel, right? That I am a part of a larger movement that is powerful, that is expansive, and it is ever expanding. And that the most important thing to me, even in election cycles for me, even when I'm trying to get to other offices, is the why, right? The why that I want to be there and what I want to do this for is because we have to, we must, and we can build power for poor and working class folks and marginalized people. That we can use every platform that we have to do that, that campaigns or a vehicle to do that, an opportunity to do that. I hope that's what people recognize, right? When they talk to me, or that's what they leave with. And that if they had to take that, that's what I want them to know about me. And what I want them to take from it is that it can be them, it can be we, everywhere we are, right? This is not just a Pittsburgh campaign. We can replicate this everywhere. We can build this out. We can all expand the realm of what's possible for someone who hasn't engaged in our movement yet. So I think that's the answer.
Thank you. Great. And actually, so I think, Summer, I think we've snagged you for a little bit longer. So we're going to keep on going with some of the questions since folks are excited and sending them in. We have Ed with us, Ed Trevor. Forgive me if I'm saying it incorrectly. Ed, can you tell us where you're joining us from, your city and state, and ask what's your question for Summer?
So I had several in there. I'm actually from Montgomery County, outside the district of Washington, DC. One is your district all firmed up after the redistricting process? Because when I was looking and it says District 18, well, there's no District 18.
District 18.
So that was one question.
Okay.
But once you get into office, there's a lot of intransigence on both the conservative Democrats and the Republicans. How do you fight that? And you've been mentioning about your fracking. Big Coal has really been fighting for a long time And I remember, I think during the Obama era, that there are all these signs out there that this is going to be the worst thing for Pennsylvania. And it seems like you've been fighting that as well. Those are just some things
Yeah, hey, I lived in Silver Spring for 3 years.
Wow.
So, hey, neighbor, nice to see and be with you here. I'll try to take those one at a time. The first question was, I forgot already. What was that first one? It was,
Is the district firmed up?
no. Someone else mentioned it because I see Georgianne has a question about the percentage of Hispanic folk in the district. We don't have districts yet. In fact, right now, it's a terrible, terrible process. And the districts are right now being litigated in Commonwealth Court, which is the second to last stop for them. The Republicans advanced maps that the governor would not sign. So right now they're in the public hearing, or I don't think it's public hearing, but they're in evidentiary hearing process in the Commonwealth Court, where folks who were interested parties were able to submit maps. And a number of folks, I think there are about 15 or so maps that have been officially submitted. The Commonwealth courts will of course hear evidence about the redistricting process, and they will have to select a map from one of those. And there are some really bad maps out there, particularly about my district. My district is really a very contentious district right now, mostly because they've seen the progressive power that we've been able to build, and they would like to try to put a dent in it. And most of their efforts will hopefully be futile because, again, we actually have traction in more areas than they think that we do. They think that this is a movement that's contained to just the city or contained to just Black voters, right? Or young progressives, at the college level. And that's not true. And hopefully they will see that, right? So right now it's in Commonwealth courts. That map, whatever they choose, will be a bad map, because there are no good ones, and it will be appealed. And when it gets appealed, it's then going to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can do whatever they want. They can pick that map. They can keep that map that was chosen by the Commonwealth Court. They can pick another one of either any of the ones that were selected or any map that exists, or they can draw their own map. Now, there's precedent in 2018 where our Supreme Court actually redrew all the districts. So in the middle of, our 10 years, Pennsylvania actually got new maps just 3-4 years ago. So they've drawn maps, and their maps weren't terrible. So I have fingers crossed that they are going to do a better job than almost everybody who is submitting a map, because these maps are very strange. There are very strange things happening with these maps, even from the fair district type people. So no, that's it. So that's why we don't have the population for Georgianne, because we don't know. They're really attempting. There's a big push right now, right, to split urban centered, areas. One of those contentions is that if we split the city of Pittsburgh in half, then maybe we can just get 2, moderate dim districts and help that. And I know some maps, split our Black population right in half. Western Pennsylvania has a growing Latino population. But it's not on par with some other areas, which is very strange about Western Pennsylvania, right? That we already don't have a large Hispanic population, but there is a growing one. And they're in communities that honestly, in some of the maps that I've seen, are in a couple of the communities that are drawn out of this one. So they might be going, a lot of folks, a lot of our Hispanic siblings might be going to the current Connor Lamb district. The next thing that you asked, and we hope that doesn't happen, right? We're fighting back against that, of course, so that we're not diluting the power of marginalized folks. The next question you asked is like, how do you work with conservative Democrats and Republicans? People are not gonna like this answer, friends. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And these folks have shown us exactly who they are. And there is this urge for us to just somehow figure out a way to work with them. Well, how do you work with somebody who wants to destroy your community? Not wants to, actively does, who sits on power and uses it and wields it against you, right? Who over incarcerates your communities, and they refuse to send resources to your schools and to your communities, who are looking at our environmental crisis and they're just refusing to act because they're putting the interests of corporations and capitalism ahead of people, right? Some folks who are about racism, right? We talk often about bipartisanship, and we hearken and we talk about the nostalgia of that time where there was more civility. And that is true. And I'm sure that everybody wishes that. We are very unproductive. I come from Harrisburg in the state house, where we are one of the least productive legislatures in the country. And that is very true. And it's so very frustrating. And if you are somebody who came in and you're like, I just want to change the life of people in my community, I just want to help them, you very quickly get discouraged in a place like that. And what we've recognized, and what I know is, as a Black woman, right, a poor Black woman who comes from a background that should never have been in the state house and should never be even a viable candidate for Congress, right? People harken back to civility, really, and that nostalgia for civility harkens back to a time where there were no women in Congress, and there were no Black people, and there were no brown people, right? And there were no queer people in office. It's much easier to set aside your differences when your differences are simply, you know, which political team do we play on? But at the end of the day, we're still building up we're still maintaining a racial capitalist system in these institutions therein. We are still maintaining the class structure that we have, and we have those in common. Well, now, if you're Black, it's very hard to go there and say, well, how can I be civil with them? And people, we have to understand that, and we have to embrace that. And we have to create the conditions where no political party is a refuge for people who would want to harm their fellow American, right? Whether they're Black or brown or queer or poor or working class, right? And that's what we need to be moving on. So my answer to that is that we don't work with them, we get rid of them. We need to organize, and we need to support movements all over the country, grassroots organizations. We need to empower them. We need to get them the infrastructure that they need so that they can do the work in their communities to advance the people who are best suited to be there and representing them. That is the answer. We should just get rid of them.
Cheers to that. Cheers to that. Okay, up next, I'm going to sneak in a few more. We have our friend Ramel Sandino from New York. He had to jump off, but he asked if I could ask on his behalf, Summer, what will you do at the federal level to advance a progressive governing agenda, including citizenship for immigrants?
Yeah. And that is, of course, like, if we're talking about progressive and we're talking about that fight to empower poor and working class folks and marginalized folks, a pathway to citizenship for all of our siblings is one of utmost importance, right? And I mentioned earlier when we were talking about just really that discouraging kind of moment that we're in, where it was a coalition of Black and brown young folks and progressives, urban-centered voters, liberals, who came forward and ensured and delivered to us a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate and the presidency. And to see the very things that matter most to us, right? That pathway to citizenship cut first from Mr. Manchin, right? Seeing the issues that are keeping us back in these communities cut first. It can be discouraging, but it should be our marching orders also, right? And it's our reminder that solidarity is, you know, life or death, right? Our liberation is tied together. So for me, what I think about is I hope to come to Congress, to go to Congress and still maintain that organizer, you know, background that I have. You don't get rid of the things that brought you here, right? That activism, that organizing, the perspective that you have growing up in your communities, right? That informs the way that you legislate and not just the policies, right? So it's important. The policies are important, right? We're going to fight like hell for Medicare for all. We're going to fight like hell for immigration reform, right? To get rid of ICE, to get rid of oppressive institutions, right? We're going to fight like hell to make sure that students are not burdened with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, right? We're going to make sure that, you know, we are advancing a just transition and recognizing the severity of our climate crisis, right? We're going to fight like that. Part of that is going to be organizing both inside and outside, right? So even now, as a legislator, in a government where we can't really get much done because the majority really has a stranglehold on us, we've still been able to do things because we've been able to organize those folks who do kind of have some position. So for me, you know, with police violence and our slate of legislation to end police violence, you know, we had to do some things that folks aren't accustomed to doing. Like, we took the rostro and we staged protests and we refused to move until they move some bills, right? We're showing them tactics that they're not used to. It shocks the sensibilities of their august building, right? And institution, right? But that's the way that we have to play, right? We have to say that, and we have to show that we're willing to get dirty in the organizing tactics that we're going to do, because we are not equals there, you know? Black and brown folks, we're not equals in Congress, even though we have a seat. And we know that, and it's okay for us to operate that way. So I, of course, plan and hope to, you know, join other progressives, you know, other who have been led right now by, you know, women of color, to help to organize that power on the inside, right? How do we best use this? How do we prioritize, these things these policies that we're pushing, but I also want to show how we can do our politics different. How are we reconnecting from the inside with people on the outside to help their organizing efforts? I mentioned that if we are true about these progressive issues that we are fighting for, we need to be clear, right? No major change in a society came from Congress or came from somebody's presidential administration. They came from movements of people on the outside, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the women's suffrage movement, the LGBT movement, right? All of those things are what actually advanced policies through Congress, right? We have been able to use that pressure from the outside to move the needle where they were unwilling to. They didn't go and they're willing to move things for us. We went in there and we took it. And that's going to be the case now as we're moving into the future. So it's important to me that we make sure that we're building a bridge from marginalized people on the outside to the inside so that they're getting the blueprint, so that they're seeing, and we're really just taking down the veil of what's happening in Congress, right? So that's my tactic. And we should check back in on that, right? As we get in, right? Because it's important that as co-governing, that we are having these check-ins so that we're adjusting our tactics if they're not working and we're assessing what does work. And that's how I plan to govern with folks, because I don't know everything and I've never been there. So I'm learning from scratch and I'm going to need and lean on you all, us, as we kind of hone those tactics.
Thank you. And then quickly, we're going to start to wrap up. I know folks have their evenings to get back to, and we want to make sure we're respectful of Summer's time. But in the chat, Janice McManus was sharing an experience she had, and I wanted to see, Janice, if you wanted to share that with everyone quickly. If so, Janice, can you go ahead and unmute yourself and share what you shared in the chat with all of us, please?
Well, I went door to door with, someone asked how voters respond to her. And I said that I've gone door to door with Summer. And I think people respond to her passion, her enthusiasm, her expansive knowledge of issues, and her honesty. And I mean, there's some people who flat out say, I'm not going to vote for you, but nobody dislikes her as she goes there. She knows how to ask the right question at the right house to the right person and to really concentrate on those folks' issues. And then my husband's here, Tony Buba, and he could say something too.
Yeah, we did a lot of canvassing, and what was in Summer's first run was amazing to me. I mean, I'm 78 years old, I've been around for a while, and it was the most excitement I've seen in a political race in my whole time in Western Pennsylvania. I went down to her office in Braddock. It was such a diverse group of people there that it was just joyful. And the energy and the building of a movement, because through that one election, now we have judges that we never had before. We got the mayor of Pittsburgh. We have people in county council. It has really done a trickle down in reality of other candidates. And this is really because the pushing of having a movement. And I really, and it was,
what really attracts
and that's what really attracts me to the whole thing is the issue of it has to be a movement.
Cheers to that. Thank you. No, that was, thank you. That was very helpful.
These are my favorite humans, but they are not plants. I did not know they were coming tonight.
No, these are real people, folks. These are real people. This was not staged. This was just happened. Janice, thank you. All right, folks. So let's start to wrap it up. I'm going to kick it back over to actually our other co-founder, Adam Green is here with us. And he's going to share a few of his last thoughts. Adam?
All right, well, this has definitely been one of the more inspiring Meet the Candidate events. I hope everyone just appreciates how amazing a candidate Summer is. Summer, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. I'm looking around this Zoom and I'm seeing, Ed Trevor, who clearly has got $10 he can spare. I'm seeing Mary Gherkin, who's got probably 13 right there. Nicole Fang, $3, $4, $10. And if all these folks decide that they want to chip in on the link that we just put in there, can you just give a little bit of a sense, the nutshell version of what will the next dollars go to? What can you use the money for? And I do want to also give props to Annie Weinberger, campaign manager, and one of our longtime allies who's on the Zoom. You're running a great campaign, have a competent person there, a nationally known progressive operator. What do the next dollars go to? What can you use this money for? And this will be our kind of closing out thought from you, Summer.
I was asking, I was like, do you want to do it? You want me to do it? She pointed at me. Yeah, so this is a grassroots campaign, right? We don't accept any corporate PAC dollars. We don't accept oil and gas, big pharma. And to be completely clear, those folks don't want to give us any dollars anyways, right? But nonetheless, we don't accept them, which means that we do rely on small dollar donors, not just small dollar donors, but those are the folks who are the engine of this campaign. So the next immediate steps on our campaign are, right, first off, we want to show folks that we aren't to be trifled with. Whatever the maps are, this is a powerful movement, and that's that, and those numbers mean something to certain people, and that's fine. We'll show them what they need to see. The second thing is, immediately, we are staffing up. We have to get, we want to bring on some brilliant organizers who are from Pittsburgh, from this region, who are just ready to get on the ground, get into our colleges. We have a lot of them here. Students who now are able to vote remotely and early. Which means that they're open up to this primary in ways that they've never been before, because Pitt typically lets out in April, which is before our election, right? So there's a slew of young people who can now vote, but we want to reach them, right? So we're going to get organizers. We want to pay them a living wage, and we want them to have a good work environment here. These are the folks who are going to engage and talk to people. They're going to meet with them. They're going to learn from them. They're going to build authentically with them, right? And we want to be able to put that money into them, and not just put our money into, some Washington consultants who are going to tell us that the only thing that's important is TV. So thus the immediate next thing that we're going to get, we should have a campaign office. That would be really nice. I'm going to pay Annie, who has been working incredibly hard and should get paid. No, so we're gonna take care of Annie, but mostly this is going to be to get talent, Black and brown folks who can go into Black and brown communities, right? Young college students who are already organizing on our campuses, right? And we want to make sure that they're compensated and that their talents are appreciated, and to see that, right? We want to put money into our communities, right? Into building up this infrastructure. And we also probably, could use the things that other campaigns use. So that's where our money is going. That's where your $5 is going to go. Is going to go into training up a brilliant organizer who's going to not just stop on this campaign. They're going to go to the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's how we're going to win big progressive campaigns in and out of this cycle.
Cool. And I'll just add one thought, and Rachel, I'll kick it over to you to end it. But I know that there's a lot of chatter out there about this might be a bad year for Democrats. We're hoping that's not true. We're doing our best to change the environment so that we pick up seats, don't lose seats. But one observation I would just put on everybody's radar is that I think this will be for progressives the year of upgrades. We're having a lot of retirements this year, and that means we can have transformational, game-changing candidates, including in blue districts where we could have a corporate Democrat who tries to undermine the entire agenda, or a game-changing Democrat who moves the agenda in the right direction. And we are very much hoping and working to make sure this is not a bad year for Democrats. But even if it is, we could actually have a ton of new progressives with fresh blood and big ideas in Congress. And we think that this will be one of those districts where no matter what the political tide is, an inspiring candidate like Summer can win. So, it's fair in some places, in some red districts, very red districts where we see progressive candidates to think, okay, let's see where we are in 6 months. Let me keep my powder dry. But this is going to be a very, very winnable district in the general. And it's very important that we make sure Summer wins the primary. So I just wanted to put that thought on everybody's radar. This is a smart investment to make. And Rachel, you want to close things up?
Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here. Summer, thank you so much. Folks, I think you can see why Summer needs to be in Congress. Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions. Summer, thrilled to have you here and joining us. Folks, if you can chip in, please do. I know some folks have already chipped in, and they've written in the chat that they've chipped in more after hearing from Summer. Jennifer wrote, let me get paid and my money Summer out for our next invite for next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, stay positive, stay safe, and we will see you soon. Thank you all for being here. Good night, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Summer.
you all so much for putting this on and for being with us this evening.
Thank you. Bye. If everyone wants to unmute themselves, we can all say bye to each other.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Summer.
Bye.
Hey, Summer.
Thanks, Summer.
Bye.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you, Rachel and Nick.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, folks. Good night.